Welcome to Sundays at Cafe Tabac, the podcast. This podcast series is an extension of our film's mission to affirm and extol the courage, strength, and joy in our LGBTQ plus community through the preservation and sharing of our personal stories and the collective histories we live through and change. I'm your host, Wanda Acosta. In this episode, we welcome Carl Capotorto. Carl is a writer and actor and best known for his portrayal of little Paulie Germani on The Sopranos. He is also the author of Twisted Head, an Italian-American memoir. Welcome, Carl.
Hey, Wanda.
How are you? It's so nice to see you.
It's good to see you, too.
What's going on? How did you fare the last year or so?
Yeah, you do what you can, right? During COVID, things were really quiet. Then the holidays come in. I love the holidays, and I love when they end.
Exactly.
I love both things, yeah.
It's always nice to get past the frenzy. Do you spend a lot of time with family or friends?
Yeah, we
holidays?
do the whole family thing, and it's a lot of food and a lot of, silly gifts. So just last night, Tom, my husband, and I took down the tree, put away the Santas. Like, okay, that's over. It's over now until next year.
And you usually spend the holidays in New York where you live,
my sister has a house out in Long Island, and we all go there and spend a couple of days. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So
how about you? You stay in town?
Actually, I spent Christmas in Florida.
Oh.
Where I am spending some time up in northern Florida in St. Augustine, and it was lovely, but it was cold.
Was it cold?
It
really?
was 27 degrees. Who knew?
What?
In Florida. Yeah, I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a winter coat.
I didn't know that. That's a little freaky, yeah.
Yeah, it was climate change. But yes, it was lovely with the grandkids and some family. And then we came up to New York for New Year's and to spend a few weeks here for the holidays. So it's been nice. And we're right here. I actually get to see the tree at Rockefeller
You're in
Center.
the middle of everything, yeah. That's the first I've seen of the tree walking here today.
That was sweet,
it's something.
So you are born and raised in New York, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Bronx.
In the Bronx, the good old Bronx.
The good old
Tell me a little
down.
bit of what that was like growing up in the Bronx.
Yeah, Italian-American family. My parents were born in New York. My grandparents were born in Italy. And I have three sisters. I'm in the middle. And we grew up like in a sort of little northeast corner of the Bronx by Bronx Park and Bronx Zoo and the Botanical Gardens right there.
Nice.
Pelham Parkway, if you took the number 2 train to Pelham Parkway, you'd be right where I grew up. And, so it was the 60s and 70s. And it was a crazy time in the Bronx in those years, in New York in general in those years. But, in the 70s, there was a lot of violence all around us. Not immediate neighborhood. Our neighborhood was like rough and tumble. The other neighborhoods were really rough. And in like junior high school, that was terrifying. There were switchblades. You lived in fear of that. Switchblade sound. A couple of kids I knew got killed. They were race riots. And then...
What was the demographics in the Bronx at that time in the 60s and 70s, particularly kind of you're saying the surrounding areas?
Yeah. Our little pocket was mostly like Jewish and kind of some Eastern European people, like working class to, I guess you'd say lower middle class, like tradespeople and laborers and low-level white-collar workers. And then there were little pockets of like Eastern European, and that was our very immediate neighborhood. And a few blocks away, where the church was, that was very Italian-American over there. And then if you went up to Allerton Avenue, that was the cutoff. And then there was a big Puerto Rican neighborhood just beyond it and a black neighborhood next to that. And nobody mixed on the streets. But at school, of course, you all came together, and it was a war zone. They would declare, like you'd hear a rumor going around, like tomorrow is Kill Whitey Day.
Oh, my God.
Tomorrow is Kill Rican Day. I was like, what the hell is going on? I was a, little peace-loving nerd. I did.
Were there a lot of gangs? Because I remember, growing up in Brooklyn in the 60s and 70s as well, I recall that there was a moment of, like, these gangs, and that they were frightening.
Yeah, I don't remember, like, gangs, like, that had names or something. But kids would just amass, you know what I mean? And they would form spontaneous gangs. and they, it could get scary. It could get really scary.
Yeah.
The high school got a little better. I sort of found my footing. But junior high school, those 3 years were
were tough.
Were terrifying. They were
And
horrible.
what were you like as a young man? Were you tough Italian boy?
God help us. No. No, I was like a nerd, but I was a fashionable nerd because I was really into the 70s fashions, which gave me away, really, for being gay. I remember once I wore a little sparkle. It was an electric green sparkle belt. And whatever, I might have been wearing like elephant bells and a Huckapoo shirt and my little belt and platforms. And this one kid looked at me and he said to his friends, "He really is gay." That's exactly what he said.
Oh,
And gay,
boy.
I don't even know if that word was used a lot, but that's what he said. He said, "He really is gay." I guess they were trying to figure it out, and they figured it out. And I loved disco. I think of it as something that really kind of saved me in a way, because I found something in that music that was, very early, talking really early. I found something that took me out of this and gave me something to aspire. It was like aspirational. It was fantastical to me. The things I heard and felt when I listened to like the long play of Love to Love You, or Donna Summer's, among her first albums, 4 Seasons of Love, which, remember was continuous play.
Right.
It just transported me. I found it transportive. That's the word. And I learned to hustle. And, then
dance,
that became
not to hustle on the street.
the actual dance. But I loved all that is a rich period for music. And so, there's like the Philly sound. I was a freak for the Philly sound before disco, right?
Right.
So like the First Choice.
Oh, they were great.
And oh my God, all that stuff. So that all helped me a lot. It really helped me.
Did the music feel sort of liberating to
It
you
was
in some
liberating.
way? And it helped
Yes.
you in your gayness or your queerness?
I think it
Or
did.
as
It made
finding
me feel
yourself?
free.
Interesting.
It
Yeah,
made me
yeah.
feel free, and it was like a glimpse of another world. Let's not forget, it was a new sound, right?
Of course.
All
yeah.
this way of producing music and singing it. Even the vocalists were doing different things than you had heard before, and you couldn't sit
And the
still.
electronics,
The electronic aspect of it, and it was just, it was free, it was liberating. It was liberating, and I just kept searching for hustle partners. Like, who can I teach? Like, you can't do it. You can't do it. And I did find a girl in high school, Margaret. Maybe she's listening because I think she was gay too. She was spectacular. And we used to hustle our butts off. Like, we'd find an empty classroom and we didn't even have music, but we would just we'd say, okay, let's do it to this song. And we knew the song, and we'd both be like sort of humming it and just
doing the dance.
Oh, it was fun.
Tell me about those spaces. I mean, so did you go to disco clubs? I mean, I know you said you were young, but this seems to have been something that stayed with you for many years.
Oh, I'm still a club head. I mean, yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what those clubs were like. What clubs did you go to? How did it feel? Was this also part of engaging with a more diverse community where you would find like-minded, queer, gay at the time people?
Yeah, it started in Peter Mazzoni's basement. That's where we'd sort of practice. And then there were some clubs. I was a little intimidated. I was not the boldest teenager. And so early on, there were clubs like in Yonkers. There was a place called Peach Trees. I think also in Yonkers was a place called The Second Floor. And we'd go to those places. And we'd sometimes come into the city. We tried to get, I remember going to Les Jardins. And we tried to get into Studio 54. They were very young. They wouldn't let us in. But we got into New York.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I remember New York.
Yeah.
That was terrific fun. You know what? It's funny. Your questions involved what was happening around me. I was so interested in just getting lost on that dance floor, hearing that music, having a good partner that I could really hustle with, trying new stuff. That was my focus. And then sometimes somebody would step in, like a woman would see who could really hustle, would see, oh, you really know how to lead. And, they'd say, may I? And then that was, that was really fun. And it was also a way to interact sort of in a sexy way with women, which I enjoy.
I was just going to ask, maybe was that even like a subconscious way of actually engaging with women?
It was, because it's very sexy. But it didn't have to become sexual. It didn't have to. It didn't have that pressure of becoming sexual, because really the release is in the dancing itself. So, that was definitely an aspect. And then in later years, and you and I have discussed this, I became, a real house head. Paradise Garage and the Sound Factory and all those places.
And did you have a similar feeling, because now it's not a partner dance, but you are in the world of music and sound, and then obviously those clubs that you just mentioned were very gay-centric.
Yeah.
So did you feel that same feeling that you got from your disco hustle?
And now in a different way, right? Because you are alone. I mean, you might go with a couple of friends, but you're dancing alone, and the gentle use of drugs got introduced. I was never a big druggie, but in those days in the 80s, they had this very pure MDMA, so you could do one little tiny pill, and you'd be good. And it wasn't like crazy. It was just enough, because I like my sleep. And so it was just enough that I can actually stay up until 11 the next morning,
Right.
We'd meet at 3.
Right.
Okay, I'll meet you at the diner at 3, at the Chelsea diner. And
AM. People.
AM. And then you walk over to the club, by 4, you're really, this place is starting to hop. It's not really going to take off till about 7 or 8.
Right.
And then, by 11 or noon, I was not able to do it without a little assistance. And I found, though, in those places, I would have kind of quasi-spiritual experiences. And I think, as did others, you know.
Yeah.
And all the fantastic, those houses, the house and ball scene, all gathered there. If you didn't feel like dancing, you needed a break, you just watch this spectacular death-defying voguing. And it's where Madonna discovered voguing. It's where she discovered the House of Ninja. She pulled Willie Ninja right off the floor.
Yeah.
Cher eventually hired Junior to do, to produce her music. Junior Vasquez.
Right. Junior Vasquez, that was at
the Sound Factory. Yeah. So, these places were...
Larry Levan at the Paradise Garage.
At, the High Priest. There's nobody. Any DJ, I think, ever, just you would try to get to where Larry was. I mean, including Junior, who I think was a brilliant DJ at his best. It was getting close to Larry Levan, but nobody could touch him. He was divine. Yeah. He really was divine.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I was either too young or just hanging out more in the sort of like the new wave punky scene at the Mud Club and area and Haraz, and I didn't go to Paradise Garage, and I'm sad that I didn't get to experience that moment, because everyone has talked about how magical it was to be on the dance floor with Larry.
The thing is that at that time it was an explosion. We could sit here and name places all day long, and some you went to, some you didn't. There were dozens. There's nothing in Manhattan right now. There's nothing.
I know. It's really crazy. There were dozens of clubs.
Dozens.
For years.
Of all kinds.
And all over.
Sizes.
Uptown, downtown, east, west.
I think it's shocking that Manhattan has none. But anyway.
Yeah. You can't afford to have a place here. It's not like the days where you could just walk in. There was no door cover. The drinks were affordable, the spaces were huge, and there was diversity. There wasn't also this sort of exclusive, it was very inclusive. And that's what made it so brilliant,
Oh, yeah.
All walks of life.
Yeah.
Together in one room, experiencing the same thing. When did you, personally, as a young man, realize that you were different, that you might be attracted to boys or men?
Right.
And how did that feel for you, and how did that sort of transfer in your world and in school?
It was really early. It's way pre-sexual that I understood this about myself. And I didn't want it to be the case. But I have a very early memory. I had to have been like 6 or 7. And, nobody was out in that period. But there were 2 guys. My father had a pizza shop on this little kind of a strip mall. And on one of the storefronts there was a beauty parlor called the Peppermint Stick. It was done up like all red and white stripes. I loved that place. And the 2 guys who ran it were Lenny and Charles. And they were, in the terminology of that day, flamers. They were flamers. They weren't hiding anything. And the women loved them. And the men accepted them. They were Lenny and Charles. You just let it alone. And I remember they came into the pizza shop one time, and Charles, who was tall, and I remember he had dark hair, and he looked like a TV actor to me. And he picked me up, and he kind of just shook me a little. He said, "What a great kid, something, something." And I remember, who knows, in your child mind, but I remember that I understood something about them.
Uh-huh.
And I understood that it was the same for me. It was this fleeting thing and it scared me in a way. I loved them. They were so sweet. And I know my mother loved them. They made my mother look beautiful. I had a lot of reasons to really like them. But I was uncomfortable with the idea that I am that, you know. And then in kindergarten, I was called a faggot. Now, why? Well, because at playtime, they were like, "Okay, boys, you go over there and play, and girls, you go over there." The boys had like some metal trucks and like a wall, and they were just jamming the trucks into the wall. Okay, and the girls had a supermarket. They had little carts, they had cans, they register. "Would you like that to go?" Whatever. I'm like, "This is fun. I'm going over here." And that was it. That was it. I wanted to play with the girls. And that labeled me very
You're
early.
a little more gentle.
It was more fun. You get to ring up sales and make change.
Like, what's fun about knocking a truck into a wall?
I had no interest in trucks. I really had no interest in trucks.
Right.
Or a wall.
Yeah.
None of it was entertaining.
It's always fascinating to me how the really flamboyant men, particularly the hairdressers, were always so accepted, right? Because they were just so over the top that there was no relation to their sexual lives whatsoever. They were just sort of parodies of this particular type of person. And they made the ladies feel super special, which they absolutely loved.
The ladies loved them.
And the men also
so the men,
like thought, oh, you know, they're whatever. They're those like funny guys that do hair.
Right. That's true. That's really I think it's true even in like till today in really tough neighborhoods. You know, somebody dressed as a, you know, I don't know, we used to say drag queen, or somebody who's actually trans, or just a drag performer, or whatever it is. But I think there's a respect, because it's like, I know that person has some kind of self-possession and some kind of courage to be walking through these streets at this hour, you know, getting on the subway. You know, and people don't mess with them, I think, for that reason.
Sadly, things have shifted a little bit now in this sort of trends,
God.
you know, and drag queen.
Done with this.
Story hour, like ridiculousness.
I thought we were done with this.
Like, I know. It's just, it's
There've been attacks in Hell's Kitchen. I've lived there many years, and it just is shocking that this is still the hell going on.
I agree. It is shocking, you know, and we have to keep fighting back and keep telling stories like this and remain visible so that we can, you know, combat all of this hate and threats to our community. You know, it really is unfair. So let's get back a little bit to your Italian-American upbringing. So as we know, Italian-Americans tend to be quite Catholic. And there's also a level of old school mentality, you know, not to stereotype, but I mean, it's the same in many families and many cultures. What was that like with you being gay and your family?
Well, in those years, like while I was still living home and stuff, I mean, it was you know, very under wraps. But I know that my father kind of suspected. And then one day, because I'm an idiot, this must have been in high school, and I would sometimes sneak down here to Times Square, and just to see whatever. It was so forbidden, you know, and it was Times Square in the 70s. It was the real Times Square. And I found this publication. It was like a newspaper, not a magazine. It was called Gay Times. Do you remember Gay Times?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was news and this and that, and there were personals ads in the back. And there was also, you know, ads for male erotica.
Right.
And so I sent away for something. They said, like, free package of, you know, photos. I was like, okay. And like a fool, I put my real name and address and everything, you know, to my family home in the Bronx.
And it didn't come like in paper wrapping or anything?
It came in plain paper. And I just thought, you know, I'm home every day from school. I will go to the mailbox first. And this one day, it was a Saturday, and it came before I could get to it, And it was a plain paper thing, but I saw my father come in the house. He called me, and it wasn't anger. It was more like dread or something that I heard in his voice, or defeat, terror, something.
Oh no! Did
and
he
he
open
called
it?
me, and he had opened it, and he was holding it, and I could see the return. It said Mr. G. Was the return. That's all, Mr. G, and it had some address in San Francisco. And he said, "Did you order something from Mr. G?" And I could still feel like my heart sank into my feet, and I was like, "No, what, Mr. Who? No, And then I said, "No, but I did." And I'm thinking fast. I was like, "But I did order something from Charles Atlas," and I had. And so I went upstairs and I got all my Charles Atlas stuff. I said, "Remember, I told you I wanted to start working out?" Not true. I just thought maybe he'd think I had said that. And I said, maybe they sell a dress, or maybe they gave the, but he knew. He knew the truth.
You?
I can't have been more than 16 would be a lot. 16, 15, 16. And I still have that Mr. G thing.
What were the images?
They were nasty.
Oh, gosh.
They were nasty. Mr. G was not playing. They were. And my father was, this is for another time and place. I write about this in my book.
Yes.
He had this anti-porn crusade, okay? So it was doubly bad. And in that capacity, he had become friends with the Monsignor at Trinity Church down on Wall Street.
Oh, wow.
He had a good a nose for cozying up to powerful people who could help him in his cause.
Right.
And so I remember at that point we were living in a house, and so he was on the downstairs phone, and there was an extension up in my parents' room. And I heard that he was talking to the Monsignor, and so I went and snuck to listen on the other end. And I remember the Monsignor saying, well, just let it go and keep your eye on the situation. If it happens again, you're going to have a talk or whatever. He said he was very reasonable. It wasn't a local guy. He was a classy guy.
Right.
And he was just saying a very sane thing. You know what, Wanda? And it makes me sad now. It saddened him. He never said more about it. After that happened,
he never said anything.
He never
again.
said more about it. After that happened, the only other thing he said right after that call was, "Were you listening?" On the other, you could hear the clicks.
Oh yeah.
Were you listening? I said, "No, listening what? No." I always tried to play like, "No, I don't know," but he knew. And he didn't say anything more for the rest of the day. And my father had a violent temper and would ride you for the smallest infraction. But on this, I think it just drove him inward. And I think he was horrified, and I think he was
probably
depressed.
shocked.
He was shocked
what
and
does
depressed.
this mean?
What does it mean?
I think today parents are obviously more informed, and there's more role models for parents and stories and support groups and conversations, for them to understand what it means to be a member of the LGBTQ plus society. But back then, I don't know that anyone or parents really understood what that meant. And I would imagine that for him to find these photographs, he just thought, oh my God, my son's like a pervert.
A pervert. Yeah. I think he thought I was a pervert. I do remember I had bought a copy of Hustler magazine, and it was because I had seen it at a friend's house. It had a naked man in it, and that's why I got it. But I hid it under my mattress. And then one day, whatever, I don't know why they were flipping mattresses. They were turning over the mattresses or something. He found it. And I remember him saying, did you have... Yes. I remember a feeling distinctly that he was relieved. And he was a little winking at me. He was like, was this yours? And I was like, yeah, but I only got it because, that was some excuse. I heard there was an article in it about something. And he said, come on, you got sisters in the house.
Right.
But I could see that he was like, whew, thank heavens. The kid's interested in,
some TNA.
Yeah, some DNA. And I tried, I did try. I would study those pictures. Yeah, they're beautiful. I can appreciate beauty. But it didn't do the same thing.
Right.
To me that these other pictures did.
And then do you think your dad ever spoke to your mom about it, or he kept her?
I'm sure. I don't think my mom was ever surprised. I think my mom knew from very early, and she was very cool with me. He wasn't.
Did you ever have an official sort of coming out conversation with your parents?
To my mother and to my father, I tried, but there was a lot of drama. He was very high drama, and when I would try to begin to talk about it, and he knew that's where I was heading, he had heart trouble, and so he would just say, stop talking. I have a pain. It's coming up my arm. It's heading right from my shoulder, then to my chest. I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to give him a heart attack.
Right.
Stop talking. And he was very dramatic. He would leave Bible passages open on my bed, and when it became clear, because I was going to move in with my then boyfriend, who I then stayed with for like 21 years. Mm. And when he knew I was going to do that, he really freaked out, and then he disowned me. So I was not
I'm sorry.
Really wasn't supposed to be part of the family anymore. But my sisters and I still dealt with each other, and so did my mother. It's so funny because my mother came to our apartment a couple of times. She'd bring big pots of food and we'd have these family dinners, but we never said anything about it. Mm-hmm. And then one time I felt like, say the words. Mm-hmm. And I said, Mom, we were on the phone, and I think it was this late. It was like 85. That's how late it was into this whole thing, right? It's years. And I got together with Fred, my ex, in 79.
Wow.
So this is like 6 years later.
Yeah.
I know it was implicitly understood, but I thought, say the words. And so I said, Mom, I guess by now it's clear you know what my relationship with Fred is. And she said, I know, of course I know. She said, but I worry. Mm-hmm. And I said, why? She said, you're not going to have kids. You're going to be lonely. Mm. Then she thought for a minute, and she said, but I mean, you have kids and you're lonely anyway. So right. She sort of answered it for herself. And then she said, I heard on the radio that gay men are turned gay because they hate their mother. Oh. And I said, no, Mom, actually the old Freudian thing is that they had a distant, stern father, and they had a doting mother.
Right.
They're too attached to their mother. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, okay. That worked for her.
That made her feel good. I'm not going to lose you.
And then she was, like that, she was like, anyway, carry on, like just whatever, next topic. Mm-hmm. She was very cool that way, my mother.
Oh, that's wonderful. Did you ever reconcile with your father?
We did, in a way. We did. After a few years of this, I said, what can we do? And, to fix this. And he said, well, you can first of all apologize, just like a blanket apology, just, sorry. Mm-hmm. And you can never bring that person here again. I tried it once or twice. And you can never mention that person's name again. And if you do those three things, you can sort of re-enter the family. Oof. And so I agreed to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
and then he said, Mary, get the anisette. Let's have a toast. That's exactly what he said. So I know he was relieved. He wanted it. And I thought, whatever. I don't need to talk to my father about Fred.
Right. He just didn't want to know it, see it.
Pretend it doesn't exist.
Right. I know in my personal situation, it was more my mom. Like my mom was like this. Like, she didn't want to see it, hear it, don't talk about it, don't bring her over for the holidays, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And that was hard for me because how could I possibly be real with you when I am not, it's not my life. I'm pretending, and it made me very angry. And I realized that it was just a reflection. My mom saw her in me, and there was this reflection for her that I was queer that she just couldn't accept as how did I produce this person, And we've gotten past that, but it was a long journey. She realized she was going to lose me if she didn't try to accept who I was and get to just, know who I was and embrace me entirely. And now, she's...
And it's a total non-issue.
It's a non-issue. Yeah, she's still funny. Like, I spent the night, the last visit I was here with her, and it was summer. It was warm, so I wore this little nightgown, a little slinky nightgown to go to bed. She was looking at me, when I was going in the room, and she was like, well, you look so sexy, Wanda. I was like, oh, thanks, Mom. And then she thought for a minute, and she's like, do you and Lisa sleep in the same bed?
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, of course, Mom. We do sleep in the
we're
same
a
bed. And then
couple.
she got quiet because she was looking at me as a sexual person and then
Right.
put two and two together that I sleep in the same bed with
That's
my
so
partner.
funny.
And what does that mean? And it kind of like shut her down for a second. And then she changed the subject real quick. So there's still moments
That's
of
too
like,
fun.
the
Right.
reality
I guess
of what
it's
it
just
is.
so foreign. Really, it was so hidden. I mean, it's not that it didn't exist in her younger years, but people just didn't talk about it, right?
Right, exactly. And your siblings were fine with
They
you?
were, yeah.
You have brothers? And
No, 3 sisters.
3 sisters also, yes.
Yeah, I don't think it was a surprise.
Oh, so you're the only son as well.
Yeah,
So
it was a tough one.
That's a whammy for Dad.
It was tough, and I felt guilty. I did feel guilty, like I was hoisting this on them,
Yeah.
and yeah, but we don't choose
And
this, do we?
that's heavy. Yeah, that's
it
a
is
heavy
heavy.
burden to carry. You feel like you're hurting your parents.
Yeah.
And there is nothing you can do about it. It is who you are, right? We have not chosen this. And who would choose all of that
Right,
emotional
that's right.
baggage
Oh,
and
that's
pain?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, look, other people. I'm sure if my father could have had his way. He said, "Well, just squash that. Just squash it, and do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Get married, have kids, just
Right.
get a control of yourself." And
Right.
I think he would view it through that lens. And it's
Exactly.
it was just never an option for me to not. I didn't know how I could live and not be true to this central fact about me.
Exactly. Did they at any point raise any concern about, were they aware of HIV and AIDS that was happening during that time as well?
Very much. My father and I never discussed that, but my mother and I did, because I lost one friend very early, a childhood friend who she knew and loved. I lost a lot of friends, but a lot of them she didn't know. My childhood friend, Peter Mazzoni, there's now a clinic named for him in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Mazzoni Clinic. Anyway, I grew up with Peter, and she loved Peter. He became a doctor. He was actually on the forefront of early HIV and AIDS treatment.
Oh, wow.
So she was heartbroken about that. And she knew, and then she did worry about me. Another almost lifelong friend, Carlos, got sick, but he didn't. He lasted a really long time. He got on the right cocktails, and he was able to live for a long time. But she was always worried about Carlos,
Right.
and she was worried about me. But I kept reassuring her, I'm fine. I stayed negative through all those years. It helped that I was in a relationship.
Of course.
But yeah, I know it
That
freaked
was
her
such
out.
a tough time. I mean, I lost so many friends
So
as
many.
well. And I lost my best friend, which was sort of shocking because he had really been sort of asexual during many of those years. Like, he would joke like, "Hey, don't worry, Wanda, it would be the immaculate infection if it ever got me," because he was not
Wow.
sleeping around. And he got sick and died. And, we finally tracked it back to his college days, because if you recall, the infection at that time could sit dormant for quite a while before there was any manifestation of, HIV. And sadly, he passed, and so did several friends and my cousin. And it was just a horrible time, as it was, for so many. But
Horrible. And I've been, you get little flashbacks, like all during COVID, this thing of positive, negative. I'm like, oh, please, I don't want to hear those. I don't want to take a test
it's so
and
true.
wait to hear there's the virus. I don't want it positive or negative. No, thank you.
Yeah.
But I was genuinely getting flashbacks,
When COVID first happened in the early 2020, I mean, I had exactly the same feeling. I called a friend in tears because I don't know if you know Mona Foote, the performer Mona Foote.
Yeah, I know Mona's work.
Nasham Wooden, he was a good friend, and he actually worked for us at Wonder Bar for many years as a bartender. Anyway, he was one of the very early COVID deaths.
Oh, geez.
And he was this strapping, healthy man. And I remember calling a mutual friend in tears because I was like, oh my God, this is like, please don't let this virus be like what we went through in the, 80s with all of our community, because it totally reminded me of that.
As an example for how it's possible to respond to a virus that's, rampaging out of control, you saw this way of doing it that ended up to be really effective right now, this with COVID. And there is a way that I've flashed back to those early years in renewed anger. For years, the word wasn't even spoken. Ronald Reagan in the White House would not say the word.
Right.
While young men, mostly young men, were dying just in droves, just waves of deaths. I mean, again, this whole COVID period has parallels.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
To that era.
And AIDS and HIV infections, you had to be physically engaged with one another,
right? That's right.
So it was this, coming together and, coming together sexually or, sharing needles. I mean, there's something that you needed to do together to get infected. True. And with COVID, I mean, in similar ways, I mean, it's just like, if you're near other people, but then it became this isolation, right? You had to be completely isolated from each other, where I guess similarly with HIV, everyone had to sort of like keep away. And
there was a lot of resistance to that. I remember there being a lot of resistance to that. Yeah.
And now I read that there's a wave of it again because of the medications that are available, that young people feel that it's okay to not worry about that because there's a pill for it,
There are so many people on PrEP. I don't know how I feel about PrEP. Do we know the long-term effects on the body, on the ability to tolerate that drug for years? Right. And I do think that it can encourage a kind of recklessness. And I think you gotta be free to explore. You're young, you're coming up, you've just embraced your sexuality. You have to be free to explore it.
Right.
So it's not that. It's just that I think the PrEP seems like too easy an answer. I'm not sure it is the answer, but it seems to be.
Yeah, I agree.
And that concerns me a bit.
And, and that's not the only concern when you're sexually active. There's all kinds of STDs out there besides, HIV. But let's get back to the fun stuff and the happy stuff. So you were the fabulous little Paulie on The Sopranos for many years.
Yeah.
And we all enjoyed watching you. And I wanted to obviously ask you a little bit about that experience. And also, did your sexuality come into play at any point during your hiring of that role? And what was that experience like for you?
It was a blast. In a word, it was really, really fun. I mean, that was a fun bunch of years. There were people on that cast who knew I was gay. There were others who didn't. David Chase is a super smart guy, and he also does his due diligence, so he probably knew. I came into the show in season 3, and I had friends who were already on the show. Aida Totoro is an old friend. Suzanne Shepard, who played Edie Falco's mother, Carmela's mother. I even knew Jimmy a little bit from Downtown Theater back in the day, and others. Dominic Chianese I knew. And so most of those people I just named knew I was gay, and I was never in the closet. So I think if somebody had asked, they would have shared it, and it was never ever an issue. It was never an issue, luckily. And I was worried, but sometimes I would worry about it.
Right.
Never came up. In fact, you know what? Little Paulie was the nephew of Paulie Walnuts, Tony Sirico, who we just lost in 2022, with the white wings. And I love Tony. We had our own relationship. It became like a uncle-nephew relationship, And when the book came out, I think that was 2008.
And this is your memoir, which I want to talk about.
Yeah, and and obviously, it's mostly about growing up and coming of age in the Bronx in the 60s and 70s, the pizza shop, the crazy house we lived in, all this stuff. And in the course of that, I talk about being gay. And I was a little anxious about certain people reading it. And Tony Sirico was one of those, because I love Tony, and I didn't think he knew this about me, and I didn't want him to think less of me or something. And the last time I saw him, and in fact, it's the last time I saw Jimmy, and it's the last time that I was together with a big group of us. Was 12/12/2012. It was a concert, the 12/12/12 concert at Madison Square Garden for Sandy relief.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And we had a box. We had this party box. Like, oh my God, that was fun. And then we would go down and man the sort of telethon.
Oh, great.
People would call in with pledges. And so up in the box, we were all chatting, and I was asking Tony, "Hey Tony, what are you up to these days?" Now this is a couple of years after Sopranos, and he said, in his Tony way, he said, "I'm on Family Guy." He said, "I'm going to be on Family. Yeah, I play the dog. They adopt like a tough dog, and I play the dog." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to be listening to that and for that." And he said, "What?" And he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I'm writing. I'm just focused on writing. I'm not really acting." And he said, "Yeah, I read your book."
Oh.
And I thought, "Oh no, here it comes." And he said, "You're a good writer." He said, "And that was a very honest, very brave thing you did there. My hat's off to you." He said, "You should keep writing. You did a good job there."
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I swear it was like a papal blessing. I don't know, I don't know that I love this about myself, that I needed or wanted that blessing. He did become kind of a father figure.
But coming
maybe
from Tony, absolutely, I can understand that.
It surprised me, frankly. I didn't expect him to say something insulting that wasn't like him. He was really a lovely guy. But I thought, he wouldn't touch it at all.
But he accepted you, and
completely.
He gave you props on your writing.
Yeah.
And embraced you, basically, right?
It meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. There is someone who was behind the scenes who was kind of an important figure on the show. And during the closing part, this was the wrap party, the final. The series wrap party, a big lavish event in LA that HBO had thrown.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And it was toward the end of the night, and everybody's in their cups a little bit. I'm not a big drinker, but everybody else was in their cups. And this woman who, again, was sort of a big name behind the scenes, and we're chatting, and I said something that would reveal that I'm gay. Whatever I said, it wasn't something risque. It was just whatever I said. Right. And she sort of put down her drink and she said, "You're gay?" I was like, 7 years later, she hasn't figured this out. I said, and I was like, "Oh, well, what do I care? The show is over." I said, "Yeah, you didn't know that?" I said, "I thought you knew." She said, "No, I had no idea." She said, "Does David know?"
Oh my goodness!
And I don't know if David knows, and it's too
why
late
does it matter, right?
But so those are two opposite ends of the. Like, she really wasn't cool with it.
She wasn't cool with it.
Well, it didn't feel at all cool.
Ah, interesting.
And here's Tony Sirico, who you would think would be more like that, and he was totally rolled off his back. So you don't know.
But
what you're
maybe
get.
She was just shocked because she's like, "Oh God, I never would have even considered that or thought about that, and look at this person. That person's gay. Oh, interesting."
I think it was that, and frankly, I think she was maybe flirting with me.
Oh,
and she might have been a little. She's like, the show's ender. The show's over. I can finally just do this, and we're at this gorgeous hotel,
like,
and
damn, I missed my chance. It's not going to happen.
So it might have been that. I'll give her that. And she wasn't mean. It was just, I think about that. I was thinking about that because you asked, one of the things you asked leading up to this was, do you have a coming out story?
Right.
And I thought, you're always coming out.
Exactly.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, you are. You are. I think our life is a coming out, full-on coming out story, because it doesn't necessarily have to be coming out story of a sexual type, We're revealing ourselves and coming to terms with ourselves and growing, and it is a constant coming out.
Yeah. And even in terms of sexuality, there's always, in a simple exchange, what'd you do this weekend? You're either going to edit it if you don't want to reveal yourself, or my husband and I went up to visit some friends upstate for the weekend. We rented a little cabin or whatever. Like, it's going to come out.
Right.
It's going to come out. I remember like when I was an office temp 100 years ago, and people would say, "So what'd you do this weekend?" And I would just substitute pronouns for my girlfriend and I did this, Frida, her name is Frida, it was Fred, my ex. I would just say Frida and I went out for whatever.
Oh God, I know the things we do, but no longer. Now, what are your feelings on the progress of LGBTQ community? What's happened in terms of being able to marry and younger people being able to live their truths, whatever that might be, and the existence of the new pronouns and the fluidity? How does that feel for you, and what do you have to say about that at all?
Look, I welcome the more openness, the better. The more personal freedom and liberation, the better. We're going to keep evolving in this direction, let's hope, right? I was just hearing something that I think Facebook offers 58 gender identities.
No way.
58.
58.
I looked them up. It might be 68. I looked them up. I think Newsweek or somebody listed them all.
How is that even possible?
I couldn't imagine what they were, so I right away went and looked them up. There's an interesting Ezra Klein podcast about...
I love him, yeah.
About the sort of new gender issues and so on. And he mentioned that fact. And I was like, what the heck? And I looked him up. And I thought, this is too divided. That was my feeling. Like, I'm looking forward to a day where we keep evolving to something simpler.
Right.
Something simpler.
Right, because we're all like one, essentially.
Yeah, how about one thing? Let's have one name for, I don't know. I'm not, not quite that, but I do feel like it's fractured. And that, of course, anytime you fracture any sort of identity or whatever, you're going to isolate yourself from others.
Right, and create the discrimination and the fear and division.
So I'd love to see it keep evolving in a way that, simplifies.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening now in your future. Do you have any new projects you want to tell us about? And is your book still available?
Still be
because
ordered. Yes,
I think we could totally get our audiences to read that beautiful memoir.
I would love for people to read that book. I love that book. And you know what happened? It's called Twisted Head, which is the translation of my name. Capotorto is Twisted Head. And what happened with that book? It was due to come out October 8th, 2008. Well, and we had all this kind of, press lined up, like whatever, NYC and, different...
I saw John Turturro and Abella Sciorra was on one of your readings and introduced you, and that was lovely.
John and Annabella came down and did a reading, and I called in all the troops, because what happened was on the day before it came out, October 7th, George Bush got on national television and said, the entire global economy is tanking. Run for the hills. And then my little memoir came out the next day, October 8th.
Right.
So everything got canceled. Whatever press we had got canceled. And it just wasn't something people were interested in. So, God bless them, the publishers, and my editor, Gerald Howard, he just retired, great man. And he stuck with it, and they put it out in paperback the next summer, and it sold a little bit. The paperback release does not command the same attention that the initial release does. So it kind of disappeared, and I was sad. I worked really hard on that. I'm proud of that book.
Well, let's get that back on the people's shelves and on their reading list.
Okay.
So Twisted Head.
And, someday, I know you're working on something having to do with 90s New York, and I would love to work on something where that book leaves off in 80s New York. And then I'm always working on a lot of my own projects that are in various stages, mostly for TV.
Right.
In various stages of potentially happening. And then what you try to do is get an actual paying job so that all your spec work, can get funded by something. And so I do have
totally understand that.
Have a show that I'm working on that we hope will make it to the full series order. It's an FX show. it's really terrific. It's not mine. I was hired to work on it, and it's great. So right now I'm waiting to hear, do I have a January, February, March, and beyond where I'm occupied and getting paid and so on? Don't know.
Right.
Don't know.
Right, right.
Check
so
back
then
with
you can
me.
work on your other stuff.
I love to do that. I love to shuttle. You know what, Wanda? Not all writers love becoming immersed in someone else's work. Mm-hmm. But if I like that other work, I am happy as can be, being fully immersed in your world. Writer's room to me is a really fun place to be. The problems that come up trying to figure out, I love those problems. I love puzzles. It's a puzzle. I love the process of it. I love a set. I love production. Not all writers like to cover, they call it covering your episode. When your episode, you basically produce it. You need to be on set every minute. And you have a lot to do, just sitting around. And I love that. But it's not so easy to get that work.
To get the work, absolutely. Yeah. And these days, it's even harder.
It's really fractured. There's so many outlets, and so it's super competitive.
Right.
Yeah. So that's some of what's going on for me. And what's going on with you? I think you have something this weekend that I'm planning to attend.
I do, and I'm excited that you'll be there. I am doing a burlesque brunch. It'll be the second one.
Okay.
It's a fun community brunch because now we're partying in the daytime, And it's at Indochine, which is, a mainstay classic restaurant in New York. It's been there 35 years.
35 years, right across the street from the Public Theater.
Exactly,
yeah, it's been there
right
forever,
across from the Public, which, it's always so much fun to go to the Public and then go there for dinner or vice versa.
Or vice versa, yeah.
Exactly. I love it.
Oh, I can't wait. And then, before I don't know if you'll mind me asking, before we started this, we talked a little bit about, there's a documentary in the works right now. I'm curious about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking. I have been working on this documentary project with my director, Karen Song, who has also helped on this podcast in the early episodes of this podcast on a documentary film that is based on lesbian visibility, that moment of lesbian visibility in the early 90s. With the nexus being a party that I started in 1993 at a place called Cafe Tabac. Right. Hence the name of this podcast, Sundays at Cafe Tabac, which is bringing it back to, what we started back then.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting and intricate story woven with many political, national, community changes that were happening in the early 90s. And what propelled, this moment of lesbian visibility, which had not really been seen prior.
Right.
So, in the quest to try to figure out what happened there, we've discovered so many things. So I really can't wait to be able to share and show. So yes, now we're in what we would call post. We're working on a rough cut. We've whittled it down from 68 interviews to 3 hours, and now the 3 hours have to go down to an hour 20.
Wow.
But like with any independent documentary film project, it takes a village to get this done,
Yes,
so we need to raise more funds and get more help, but we're on track, and we hope that we can keep pushing forward. But yes, anybody that wants to support and donate to this film, cafetabacfilm.com, and it is a tax-deductible donation through Women Make Movies, who's our fiscal sponsor.
I imagine you could do a GoFundMe campaign.
We've done the Kickstarter, and we've had wonderful fundraising events, and we're very, very appreciative of everyone that's supported us thus far. We just have to get to that next milestone.
It's always so. Any kind of indie filmmaking, this is the whole money, money, money.
Oh, it's difficult. And like what you were saying earlier, we need the jobs to get us to be the paying jobs to get us to be able to work on these independent projects, and when you get those paying jobs, you have to put the independent project to the side because you can't, it's hard to do both.
Can't do both. But in a perfect world, they kind of meld in with each other really nicely. They just
ideally, yes.
So we hope let's hope that look, it's the new year.
It's the new year.
That in 2023, there's a perfect balance.
It's going to
of all
happen
those
in
things.
23. We're super excited, and
Yes, we are.
the goal and the mission is out there. So yes.
Right.
But Carl,
Wanda,
thank you. Thank you so much for coming to the studio. It's been a pleasure, as always, to see you and talk to you. Much success on the FX show and your continued endeavors. And folks out there, please go out and look for Twisted Head, an Italian-American memoir, Carl's memoir. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Thanks, Wanda. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. For more, subscribe to Sundays at Cafe Tabac, the podcast. You can also learn more about us and our film at cafetabacfilm.com and at Cafe Tabac Film on social media. Please share your thoughts with us, and if you have a coming out story that you'd like to share, reach out to us. This episode was recorded at the Newsstand studio at Rockefeller Center, here in the heart of New York City. Special thanks to Joseph Hazan and Karen Song for their support. See you next time.